very, very low wages. That's got to change, and that's the message for today.
So you're talking about the need to treat American workers with dignity. What does that look like?
I'll tell you what it looks like. What it looks like is that we rebuild manufacturing in the United States of America, not in China and not in Mexico. It means that when workers want to form a union, you don't hire anti-union consultants to make it impossible for them to do that. It means instead of giving massive amounts of money and stock buybacks to the people who own the company and paying your CEO with John Deere, I think the fellow who's the CEO is making $29 million a year. You know, instead of doing all that, you say, you know what? A good company means to say you have to have support and respect from your workers and give them respect. And you do that by treating people with dignity. And that's not the case right now.
Well, Senator, there seems to kind of be a post-pandemic resurgence in union activity. I was on the picket lines yesterday with Teamsters 238 in Cargill in Cedar Rapids.
Yep.
And do you think kind of these companies have made billions over the pandemic?
Yes.
Do you think kind of the union movement is picking up muscle here in Iowa and across the country?
Absolutely it is, no question about it. Right now, what the polling tells us is that more people are sympathetic to unions than has been the case in many, many decades. And the reason for that is pretty clear. It's what they are seeing is the very richest people in America becoming much richer. They're seeing many of these corporations making huge profits, giving their CEOs compensation packages that are 300-400 times more than the workers make. And people say, you know what? That's wrong. All right? You know, working people are entitled to a decent life in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. All of the wealth cannot go to the people on top. So I think that is why you're seeing a resurgence in the trade union movement, and I strongly support that. Okay?
What do you want people to walk away with today, especially here in Dubuque, where, you know, a lot of John Deere workers in Dubuque have lost their jobs?
I want people to understand this is something that can be changed, that we got to stand up to corporate greed, that the function of a corporation is not just to make huge profits for its stockholders, and pay their CEOs outrageous compensation packages. It is to treat workers with respect and dignity. And in the long run, when you do that, you develop a kind of relationship with your employees that works well for everybody. So the message is stop the corporate greed, treat your workers with respect. All right? All right, thank you very much.
Got a quick Social Security question,
Yeah.
if you don't mind. You've proposed improving Social Security's solvency by taxing the wealthiest Americans.
Yeah.
Vice President Harris, if she was to become president, how would she accomplish that and get it through Congress?
Well, you're going to need sympathetic support in the House and the Senate. But here is the bottom line. You got about 25% of seniors in this country living on $15,000 a year. The funding mechanism of Social Security is very unfair. What it says is if somebody makes $16 million a year, they put into the Social Security Trust Fund about the same as somebody who makes $168,000. That's the max. If you lift that cap and you only, go after the very wealthiest people in this country, you can do two things. You can expand Social Security benefits, make sure that our elderly people get more than they're getting right now, and increase the solvency of Social Security by decades. And that, in my view, is what we've got to do.
And is that achievable to pass through Congress?
With the support of the American people, it is. This is wildly popular. We've polled on this issue. 75% of the American people, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, support it. All right, I think I've got to get going.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
I'm walking away with your mics.
We'll have fun with that.
It's a good question.
Thank you very much. That's right.
I think that's fine.
There we go.
Do you guys want to take one? Do you mind if we take one quick picture all
Sure.
together?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that'd be great.
Everyone get it.
I'll take it.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
All right, everyone get in. 1, 2, 3. There you go. Thank you guys.
Thank you very much, Senator. Tara, do you have my number? I don't know if we've ever exchanged information. We'll figure that out when we get up there. So we'll all be in the same spot.
Thanks for knocking out those good questions.
So, that's it. I knew we didn't have much time, so I'm like, let me get one and get out.
Bit in my hand. My name is Jody Clemens. I'm from West Branch, Iowa. I am the daughter of a steel worker and married to an auto worker. and a union member myself, and I'm so glad to be here with you all today. This crowd is amazing. But you're not here to listen to me. You are here to listen to our wonderful speakers. And so I'm going to bring the first one up here in a minute. We're going to welcome Chad Kaiser, who is the president of the UAW Local 94 here in Dubuque. Let's give him a welcome.
Well, good afternoon. Chad Kaiser, President, UAW Local 94. I represent about 3,200 workers at John Deere Dubuque Works, active and retired. So I was privileged to be asked to come up and speak, and we wanted to talk about outsourcing. So at Local 94, we've been hammered over the last 4 years here at Dubuque. First, we were given notice right prior to the 21 contract of one of our forestry lines leaving John Deere Dubuque Works, being taken to Langley, Canada. After that notice, about 2 months after that notice, we were given notice, the union, by the company, that they were going to take our small skid steer line and move that to Monterrey, Mexico, outsourced to Mexico. Time frame after that, month after month, we were given more and more outsourcing notices from different weldments to track frames, V-plenums. I mean, I can list the parts, but constant outsourcing. And what I will say, those parts were outsourced to non-union factories here in the United States. Then the last blow came this May of 2024. We were given notice that they were going to outsource our mid-frame skid steer line. That was getting moved to a new facility that John Deere was building in Ramos, Mexico. So constantly, we've moved through this. We've been lucky, I will say it that way, but it's not in a good way, that with attrition, with retirements, terminations, and quits, we haven't seen much of a reduction in manpower because of this outsourcing. The orders currently are what's driving the layoff. So, you guys the community understands we've had a layoff in Dubuque here of 99. I do want to touch note on, we're not the only local. So every local in the chain, from Davenport to Waterloo to Ottumwa to Coffeyville, Kansas to Seating and Cylinder and Harvester and Moline, every production local has received sourcing notices constantly. It's been nonstop since contract in 2021. So as we move through that hurts. And it's going to Mexico, and the bad part is a lot of this is completely legal under the USMCA, our NAFTA 2.0. So these companies, not just Deere, but CAT, Kubota, Case, IH, a lot of companies, they're moving this down there and they're bringing parts and sourcing in through Asia Global, China, Mexico, wherever they're getting the parts from, and then producing down there and bringing them right back into the U.S., basically tariff-free. So a lot of the tariffs that were put on really did nothing to stop this. And anything, it might have actually expedited it, because they're moving stuff out of America to Mexico to avoid paying the tariffs of bringing products in from other countries into the U.S. And a lot of these corporations, they have groups of people that their sole job is just to find the loopholes on how to circumvent and try to bring people in. These corporations, their ultimate goal is profits, greed, corporate greed, and they will continue to keep moving that way. The other issue that we've been facing more and more that I wanted to bring up is unemployment. As most people know, last year, Iowa in July, they signed into the law the new unemployment bill. So that took effective unemployment benefits from 26 weeks down to 16 weeks. And when we move through that, at John Deere and in many union contracts, we have temporary layoff language. So that allows the companies to, instead of indefinitely laying off employees, they're going to temporarily lay them off to try to bridge this gap so we don't have to face indefinite layoffs. The problem that you run into is our contract is at Deere, between the UAW and John Deere, we have 16 weeks of temporary layoff language, and we have 16 weeks of unemployment. But our contract year and the first claim year doesn't add up. So one of the problems that we're facing, not just in Dubuque, but other locals, is that we have members now that will be getting temporarily laid off with no unemployment benefits. So they'll be on temporary layoff, trying to starve off indefinite layoffs with no unemployment benefits. That's already happening in a couple different locals already, and it's only going to get worse. So these are some of the troubles that we're facing here. in Dubuque. And the last issue I want to touch on is it's not just Dubuque Works that suffers. So a lot of communities around here I want to talk on. When we look at other businesses that feed or supply parts to John Deere. So when John Deere slows down, like with any community where you have a big manufacturing facility, this reverberates out to a lot of smaller facilities that end up readjusting manpower, laying off. So it's not just Dubuque. I don't want to, I can't name everything here today. I'll be here for an hour. But you see it trickling out further and further and further, maybe to Epworth, Monticello, here in Dubuque, up into Wisconsin, into Illinois, where the supplier parts, orders go down, layoffs happen, they outsource product lines, and then now those companies have to lay off workers, shut down, move factories, and they're following suit. So it's just a real trickle effect, and it just doesn't stop. So that's what I was here to share. Hopefully we can get somewhere with that, with the USMCA and NAFTA 2.0, and move forward to make these better agreements and not so one-sided against, in my opinion, the manufacturing and blue-collar workers in America. Thank you.
Chad, President of Local 94, and now please help me welcome to the stage an Iowa CCI member and the president of the Table Mound Tenant Association, Carla Crockford.
Hi, my name is Carla Crockford. I'm a member of Iowa Citizens for Community Improvement, a co-chair of the Iowa Manufacturing Home Residents Network, and I am president of the Table Mound Tenants Association. For the past 5 years, myself and my neighbors have been fighting back against unjust rent hikes and a lack of park maintenance after our community was purchased by private equity park giant Impact Communities. Over the past 5 years, our rent has more than doubled. Our park has fallen into disrepair, and our concerns have fallen on deaf ears. Our folks have been struggling to make ends meet. When these rent hikes started, we had a resident that needed insulin and other life-saving medications. He had to stretch 2 weeks of medicine over 4 weeks. He lost his life to these rent hikes because of that. A little over a year ago, we held a meeting with Iowa CCI and decided as residents we wanted the park in our hands and not a private owner. We wanted to end our struggles with Impact. What we found out shortly after is that Impact purchased our park using a loan that was backed by the federal government under Freddie Mac. We started filing complaints with the Federal Housing Finance Agency, and for the first time since our park was bought, we got Impact to meet with our tenant association. We knocked over 1,500 doors in parks Impact purchased using Freddie Mac loans. And in May, over 70 of us met with the Federal Housing Finance Agency to demand accountability for our parks. On July 12th, we learned that Impact intends to sell all of their Iowa parks. During all of this, we started meeting with the City Council started in November, and we brought to them the idea of a community land trust made up of Table Mound and Terrace Heights mobile home parks. This past summer, Dubuque submitted a $50 million grant application to the Department of Housing and Urban Development to do just that. We currently are waiting to hear back from HUD on what Dubuque will be awarded, but I can say the thing we know for sure is that when tenants band together, we have power. Private equity companies, big banks, and the corporate landlords only have as much power as we let them have. We believe that government can work for people. We've been here 5 years and we're not going anywhere. We're going to bring this fight to the finish line, and we're going to put the power to making decisions about housing back in the hands of our community. Thank you.
And next up, we have a second-generation UAW member and who is currently the director of UAW Region 4, a 12-state region which covers the state of Iowa. Please welcome Brandon Campbell.
Good afternoon. Thank you both. Very, very informative. Appreciate everything. Like the voice of God that you heard said, my name is Brandon Campbell. I'm the director here at Region 4. But across the river in Illinois and Wisconsin, and right here in Iowa, corporate greed and terrible trade policies are destroying lives and wrecking our communities. You'll notice my shirt. I am Belvedere. I'm from Belvedere, Illinois, home to Local 1268, UAW. Insatiable corporate greed shut my home plant down and moved our jobs to Mexico. People I grew up with, people I've known my whole life, have been displaced so the filthy rich can get filthier and richer. Like many here, I've lived through ups and downs of a cyclical economy. These peaks and these valleys, they can be tough, sure. But this isn't a typical economy, not at all. This is unchecked capitalism and trade policy that not only allows, but absolutely encourages corporations to send our jobs across the southern border, and we need to fight back. Here in the Midwest, we know very well what NAFTA is and what it did to our communities. We also know that Donald Trump claimed to have fixed trade with his so-called trade deal. We call it Trump's NAFTA, or NAFTA 2.0. He claimed mission accomplished. He was wrong. Despite his victory celebrations and all of his self-congratulations, Trump's NAFTA has been absolutely brutal for the working class. Brutal. It's been exactly the same as the old NAFTA, right? It's been especially devastating for our members working at Stellantis, for those who used to make the iconic Oreo cookie in Chicago, our members in Milwaukee, and right here in Dubuque. Trump's NAFTA gave companies like John Deere, Case New Holland, Nabisco, and Masterlock, he gave them a green light to send good union jobs to Mexico, leaving our members and so many others left to suffer. And here's the thing. Under his failed deal, and make no mistake, it is a failure of a deal, it's only going to get worse. But Trump's NAFTA is up for review in 2026, so it's not all bad news. We get to re-look at this thing. So we've got to ask ourselves, who do we want? Do we want Donald Trump back in office? I wasn't even done yet, but you guys got it, right? Do we want him in office to lock in these terrible trade deals and continue this attack on American jobs? Do we want that? Thought I might get that answer. But look, he may say all the right things, all the things that we want to hear. Hell, I say it all the time. He got elected on Labor's message in the first place. He just didn't do anything about it. So he'll say all of those things, and then he's going to say something different to his billionaire buddies, right? He said he was going to bring back coal. He said Mexico was going to pay for the wall. Hell, he even said he was a humble guy. Really, he said that. But more importantly, he said nobody knows more about trade than me, right? Well, if that's the case, then he knew that your jobs were going to Mexico after signing his version of NAFTA. Trump talks a lot about a wall and about a border crisis, and I don't want to minimize our border crisis. But his trade deal scares me far more than working people who may not look exactly like me, coming north. I'm much more worried about him deporting our good American jobs to the south. That is the real border crisis that we face in this country. Now look, we can choose the person who knows more than anyone about everything, but only serves himself. Or we can elect a proven leader like Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is someone who has fought consistently and constantly and stood up for working families. Kamala Harris was one of only 10 senators who had the guts to vote against Trump's NAFTA. Another one of that group of 10 is here today, and you may have heard of him as well. We need people who are going to vote with us up and down the ballot to undo Trump's disaster trade bill and fight for good union jobs, jobs that support our families, our communities, and our way of life. We need to kill Trump's failed NAFTA 2.0 and give life to jobs that provide a pathway out of corporate-owned housing, out of endless cycles of poverty. Because of the billionaire club and the presidential candidate who told them that he's for sale. Too many American workers are toiling away in a job that they can't afford to keep, but they can't afford to leave either. We know that Trump can't or won't admit when he's wrong. We know that. We've seen it, right? We know that his failure shot our trade deficit with Mexico through the roof. But he won't do anything to jeopardize his wealthy donors or anything that might make him or them actually pay their taxes. So until we get rid of Trump's NAFTA, we're going to see more and more and more announcements like Deere has made, more than once, unfortunately, here in Dubuque and elsewhere across Iowa. We're going to see more people lose their jobs, more families split up, and more communities suffer. This fight chokes me up a little bit. This fight is personal for me. I've watched it hit my hometown for the last couple of years, and just as many of you have here in Dubuque, I'm not going to stand by and let corporate greed win, not without a fight. It affected me. It affected my family. My daughter and my grandkids live hundreds of miles away now because of Stellantis' corporate greed and shutting down their home plant. This one's really personal. It tragically affected the family of Antonio Gaston. He's a UAW member who worked at the Chrysler Belvedere assembly plant. He was forced to move to Toledo when Belvedere shut down. He died there in that plant. He should have never been in that plant. It was a workplace fatality, and if Chrysler wouldn't have shut down Belvedere, Antonio Gaston would be alive today. He should have never been in Ohio, but for Stellantis' greed. With their deep pockets and their paid-for politicians, rewriting our collective future is not going to be easy, not at all. But our determination, the solidarity born out of our shared class struggle with groups like Iowa Citizens for Community Improvement, joining the UAW on a stage with a legislator who's always been on the side of working class majority like Senator Sanders. We can change. We can change the trajectory of our communities and our country. It's way bigger than all of us. We can change that trajectory. We owe it to families here in Dubuque, to the family of Antonio Gaston, and we owe it to each other. Think back. Think back to 2019 when UAW members went on strike against General Motors. Kamala Harris didn't just say that she supported us. She was out there walking the picket line with us, standing shoulder to shoulder. Meanwhile, where was Donald Trump? I heard golfing or tweeting, right? One of those things. He didn't lift a finger. He didn't actually do anything to help the working class in this country, the people that put him in office, even though he was the sitting president. Maybe he was sitting on JD's couch, I'm not sure. All right, a couple of you pay attention. He didn't care then, and he certainly doesn't care now. The Biden-Harris administration has bet on the American worker. They have invested billions to rebuild American manufacturing, incenting corporations to stay here in the United States of America so our communities will benefit and not just their country clubs. Harris has spoken out against Stellantis for trying to walk away from the promises that they made. That's the kind of leadership. That is the leadership that we need. One candidate was given COVID tests to Vladimir Putin. The other is Kamala Harris. She is for us. One candidate talks about 200% tariffs that would violate, those tariffs would violate his own horrid trade policy. The other candidate voted against Trump's failure. So look, we're in a position now to control our own destiny. And if not now, when? You know the rest. If not us, who? Let's get to work. Let's make sure that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz win this election. Because when they win, we win. And when we, the working class, come together and fight, when we fight, say it with me, when we fight, we win. When we fight, we win. Let's get out there and fight like hell for our jobs, for our livelihoods, for our communities, for our country. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And now I'm back again. Seriously, thank you. Thank you all for being here. But now, I have the distinct honor to introduce someone who has always been on the side of working people. Someone who has always stood up for those who would otherwise be left to stand alone. Someone who has always spoken truth to power. Someone who 31 years ago said about NAFTA during a House debate in 1993, for those of you who aren't quick with the math. Quote, corporate America and the big money interests have told us that NAFTA is a good deal. He went on to say, I don't believe them. Senator Sanders was right. On Trump's NAFTA 2.0, the USMCA, Senator Sanders said, and I quote again, when Trump was a candidate for president, he promised that he would stop the outsourcing of American jobs to Mexico, China, and other low-wage countries. It hasn't happened. When Senator Sanders talks, we should listen. Senator Bernie Sanders has been many, many things. A rock star meme with mittens, the quintessential nightmare of CEOs, and always a champion of those left behind by politicians from both parties that are sucking up to the big money. My friends, true patriots, please welcome Senator Bernie Sanders.
Thank you. And I thought Brandon was going to be talking about my discussions with George Washington, Abraham Lincoln. But let me thank Joe Collins for the music and Chad Kaiser, who's done a great job here with Local 94 of UAW in Dubuque, and Carla Crothel, who is working aggressively to make sure that people have decent housing in the community. And thank Brandon. Brandon is doing a great job with the UAW, or revitalized UAW. So let me thank all of you for being here. Special thanks to John Deere workers. When 10,000 UAW workers waged a successful 5-week strike against the corporate greed of John Deere a few years ago, I was very proud to stand with you then, and I'm proud to be here standing with you today. It is beyond unacceptable that John Deere has thrown 1,000 workers out of their jobs in recent years and threatens more in the coming future, and that's in Iowa and Illinois, and are taking those production lines out of the Midwest and sending them to Mexico, where desperate people are working for starvation wages. You know, we hear a lot about patriotism in America, and we see some of these companies with their big, huge flags, and people carry their Bibles and everything else. You know what? If you love this country, you love the American worker who has built what this country is about. And you don't throw them out on the street. You don't disrupt their families. You don't force them to move. You don't cut them, force them to take jobs at half the wages. That's not what you do when you love America. And the story with John Deere, unfortunately, is a story we're seeing all over this country. And this is not a poor, John Deere were a poor, broken company. We might understand some of what they're doing. John Deere is an extremely profitable corporation. Last year they made $10 billion in profits. This year they're going to make over $6 billion in profits. Over the last 20 years, they have provided $43 billion in stock buybacks and dividends to the people who own the company. And their CEO, Mr. May, is struggling to get by on $27 million a year. Now, what is important also about John Deere is to understand that this is a company that has received nearly $300 million in corporate welfare from American taxpayers over the last several decades. Okay, that's important to know. As the chairman of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee in the Senate, my message to John Deere is pretty simple. Stop these layoffs. Put your employees in Iowa and Illinois back to work. Stop outsourcing jobs to Mexico. End your greed. Treat the workers of your company with the respect that they deserve. And let me also say to the management of John Deere that if you think you can throw American workers out on the street and then come crawling to Washington for your welfare checks, that ain't gonna happen. But the issue here with John Deere is an issue we are seeing all over this country, and Brandon touched on what it's about. We have had trade policies for many, many decades, supported by Republicans and Democrats, that were written by the CEOs of large corporations. Not hard to understand. If you are a greedy corporation and you could care less about American workers and the communities in which they live and the schools in which their kids attend, and all you care about is your bloody bottom line, no matter what you do to the American people, then it's pretty clear what you're going to do. What are you going to do? Why would you pay somebody 20, 30, 40 bucks an hour so that person can have a middle-class existence when you can go to Mexico and pay desperate people? And I'm not here to talk against people in Mexico. They're trying. But desperate people, $2, $3 an hour. I will never forget, I was mentioning to Brandon when we were on our way here. I'll never forget this. Way back in the 1990s, when NAFTA was being debated, and all the corporations and Democrats and Republicans, oh, it's going to be a great thing. I went to the Maquiladora area in Mexico. You all know what the Maquiladora area is? It borders on the United States. It's a special zone where corporations are given all kinds of breaks to settle, to come in. Never forget this. Probably in '93, a few years after I got into the House. We went there, and you walk around, and you see all of these beautiful state-of-the-art factories. American factories, European factories, Asian factories, beautiful new factories. And then you go and talk to the workers. I'll never forget this. We went to an area. Do you know, you ever seen the large cardboard boxes the refrigerators come in? You all see that? Workers there at that point, this is back in '93, were literally living in cardboard boxes. There was a lecture court that gave them the electricity for their community. They were drinking filthy water. They were working at that point in these brand new factories for 25 cents an hour. Never forget that. So what corporate America is about, if they can make an extra buck, why not throw workers in America out on the street? Why do you have to deal with a union like the UAW? Go to Mexico, pay desperate people pennies an hour. And that's what NAFTA was about. That's why I opposed it. That's what permanent normal trade relations with China was about. I heard the same line, oh, open relations with China. I want good relations with China. But I don't want corporations in this country to be run into China throwing American workers out on the street. All of you know, we have lost thousands and thousands of factories in this country. Communities have been destroyed because of these disastrous trade agreements. So the message that has to go out, whether it's NAFTA, PNTR with China, U.S., the new Trump trade agreement, is we need trade agreements in this country written by workers, written for workers, and not the CEOs of these large corporations. And while I'm here, what I'm going to do in a moment is open it up to discussion. I'm not going to give you a long speech, only 2-3 hours. And then we'll have a discussion. But I also wanted to commend CCI for the important work they're doing in addressing the affordable housing crisis in Dubuque and all over Iowa, particularly in mobile home communities. And let me tell you, man, that is, whether it's Iowa, whether it's Vermont, whether it's California, we got a major, major housing crisis. And I was very pleased to see that at the beginning of her campaign, Kamala Harris made a pledge to build 3 million units of affordable housing. That's something that's desperately needed. But here in Dubuque, it is beyond unacceptable for corporate landlords like Impact to be buying up mobile home parks and jacking up rents in Iowa by as much as 87% and throwing longtime residents out on the street. And I appreciate that CCI has taken on this type of corporate greed. By working with the city of Dubuque to establish a community land trust with 2 mobile home parks, CCI is beginning to make housing more affordable for more than 700 people in the city. And that's a good thing. And I'm kind of proud to tell you that when I was mayor of Burlington way back when, that city, my city, was the first to create we created the first municipally funded community land trust in the United States, way back in 1984. And that is a concept that has spread not only all over the country, but actually in many parts of the world. What I want to do now, and I'm going to open it up, I want your comments. I'm going to ask you questions, you ask me questions. I want to do what is too rarely done in our country, and that is to take a hard look at where we are as a nation, going beyond sound bites and hating this group or that group. So what's the reality of the American economy today? Very simply, in my view, the major point to be made is that you live in a nation today where the wealthiest people are doing phenomenally well. All right? In fact, they have never ever had it so good while tens of millions of people are struggling to put food on the table and take care of basic needs. Today in America, we have more income and wealth inequality than we've ever had in the history of this country. You all know what that means, income and wealth inequality? It means, the gap between the people on top and everybody else. Today in America, and much of this stuff, for reasons that I think you understand, you don't hear on the television and you don't hear in the halls of Congress. People don't want to talk about it because they don't want to offend powerful special interests, and also because who owns the corporate media is owned by large conglomerates. So not only do we have more income and wealth inequality, we have a situation, if you can believe it, where 3 people on top own more wealth than the bottom half of American society. You got it? 3 people here, 160 million people there. 3 people own more wealth than the bottom half of American society. Top 1% now owns more wealth than the bottom 90%. Since the implementation of Trump's tax breaks for the rich a few years ago, 750 billionaires doubled their wealth and became $3 trillion richer. That's a T. Got it? Today in America, corporate CEOs make 300 times more than their workers. Today in America, we have a rigged tax code so that the effective real tax rate of billionaires is lower than a fireman or a cop or a truck driver. Okay? Today in America, you have very profitable corporations making billions of dollars a year in profits that pay nothing or very, very little in taxes. But it is not only a massive level of income and wealth inequality, it is also something else that we don't discuss: concentration of ownership. All right, help me out here. What do I mean by concentration of ownership? That's right. It has to do with monopolistic activities. So what you're seeing in sector after sector, whether it is agriculture, transportation, financial services, healthcare, media, whatever it may be, you're seeing fewer and fewer very large corporations controlling those sectors and able to set prices. So when you talk about the inflation that we've had over the last couple of years, a lot of reasons for it. But I think the main one is look at the profits of many of these large corporations. They're raising profits and driving up prices for consumers at grocery stores, at the gas pump, etc. Corporate profit soaring, prices are going up. And I want to mention one factor. Talk about concentration of ownership. Talk about power. I want you to hear this one. Today, 3 Wall Street investment firms. They are BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. Got it? 3 firms control assets of over $20 trillion and combined are the major stockholders in 95% of S&P corporations. What does that mean? You look at a corporation and say, oh, that's a corporation. It's not owned, it's owned by somebody else. And if you look and do it, Google this stuff, go to the corporation, find out who owns them, you'll find BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, combined are the major stockholders in 95% of the corporations. 3 companies. That is enormous power. And then tied into that is political power. Anybody notice what's been going on in this campaign? The role that billionaires are playing? All right. So not only do you have an economy increasingly controlled by a small number of billionaires, you have a political system controlled by a small number of billionaires. And while it is true Republicans are getting a whole lot of money for the billionaire class, let me tell you, Democrats are as well. All right? So you have a corrupt political system which, as a result of Citizens United Supreme Court decision, allows billionaires to put as much money into the political parties and the candidates as they want. That, to me, is not democracy. All right? That is oligarchy. Now I want to tell you something else. Again, this is the kind of stuff, to be honest with you, it's not talked about in Congress, because many members of Congress are dependent on campaign contributions from wealthy individuals, not talked about in TV, in the corporate media. Over the last 50 years, as everybody in this room knows, we have seen an explosion in technology. If you're a John Deere worker here, you are producing, the rate of productivity in your plant is much, much greater than it was 50 years ago, because you have tools that workers 50 years ago did not have, okay? They didn't have computers, they didn't have robotics, they didn't have all the stuff that we have right now. So my question to you is, in the last 50 years, with all of this new technology, with all of this increase, huge increase in worker productivity, is the average American worker today making more or less than he or she did 50 years ago? No, you're right. But I want you to think about it. So in Iowa and Vermont and all over this country, people are angry. Sometimes they don't know why they're angry. Maybe they got angry at the wrong people. But think about a system in which worker productivity has exploded, and yet in real inflation accounted for wages, we're earning $40 a week less than we did 50 years ago. And as part of that story, the Rand Corporation, which is not a terribly socialistic organization, they did a study on income and wealth inequality. And what they discovered is that over the last 50 years, that same period of time, there has been a $50 trillion transfer of wealth going from the bottom 90% to the top 1%. Got it? So what we have seen right now in this country, people on top just doing unbelievably well, while at the same time 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. We're seeing 600,000 people sleeping out on the street. We're seeing 25% of our seniors trying to get by on $15,000 a year or less. And we are very worried that our younger generation may, for the first time in American history, have a lower standard of living than their parents. That is what is going on in the economy today. Now, we don't talk about it again. This is not an issue that the 1% or the billionaire class wants to talk about. But that is, in fact, what is going on. And what I'm here to tell you is that living in the richest country in the history of the world, we can do better and we must do better. And one of the very positive things that's been happening has been the growth in the last couple of years of the trade union movement in this country. If workers are standing up and they're saying, you know what? You know, when the UAW went on strike against the Big Three, they're pointing out that the head of General Motors made $29 million. They had young people coming into the factories making 16, 17, 18 bucks an hour. Real wages gone down. The UAW stood up and said, you're going to end that corporate greed, and they won a great contract, and they inspired people all over this country to say, you know, when workers stand together, we can make real change. So what do we need to do? Well, in my view, in the next 4 weeks, we need to do everything we can to elect Kamala to be our next president. But we have got to do more than that, because the vast majority of the people are hurting, and we've got to figure out a way to bring people together to fight for real change. Let me give you an example. All right, I'm going to tell me what you think. I don't want you to tell me what I think. How is our healthcare system doing in America? Doing really good? Okay. What country on earth spends more money on healthcare than any other? Anyone know? You know how much money, anyone here know how much money we spend per person on healthcare? over $13,000, combining everything, all right? Combining what you pay out of pocket, what your employer pays, Medicare, Medicaid, VA, everything else. Add it all together. Over $13,000 for every man, woman, and child. That is twice as much per capita as people in other countries around the world. How many countries, wealthy countries, do not guarantee health care to all of their people? Anyone know? One. You're living in it. So the question to be asked, how is it that we spend so much, twice as much as the Canadians and the countries of Europe, and they cover all of their people, and yet we have 85 million uninsured or underinsured? There are people I expect in this room, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, who may have insurance, but you got huge deductibles and copays. Is that right? What kind of, somebody tell me, what kind of deductibles do you have? 5,000. 8,000. 7,000? 9,000. Uninsured. All right, and I have talked to people who have deductibles of up to $15,000. So that means, if you get hit by a truck, your insurance will kick in. But for ordinary medical needs, if you don't have any money, you can't afford to go to the doctor. And the truth is, we are losing some 60,000 people every single year because they go to the doctor too late or they never go to the doctor at all. I'm chairman of the committee that deals with this stuff. So I talk to doctors all over the world, all over our country. And they say people walk into their doors really, really sick. And they say, well, why didn't you come in when you first noticed your symptoms? Well, I didn't have any insurance. I had a high deductible. I couldn't do it. We lose 60,000 people a year as a result of that.
How about paying for those medicines, too?
Ah, right now on my list. That's the next one. Okay. All right. So all right, but I want to stay on healthcare. What is the function right now of the American healthcare system? All right. So the bad news is that 85 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured. We don't have enough doctors. We don't have enough nurses. We don't have enough dentists. We don't have enough mental health counselors in the middle of a mental health crisis. We don't have enough pharmacists. But here's the good news. Top 10 drug companies made over $100 billion in profits last year. We had a guy before our committee, head of one of the major drug companies, making $50 million. Okay? So it's not only insurance, it is also the pharmaceutical industry, where we pay by far the highest prices in the world. Now I want to say that working with President Biden and the Vice President, we have made some progress. Now, what progress have we made? A couple of years ago, I went from Detroit, I took a bunch of folks from Detroit, the Midwest, into Windsor, Ontario, to buy insulin. They were diabetic. Take a guess, a wild and crazy guess at the differential in price for the same exact product, same bottle, same company, in Windsor, Ontario versus Detroit, Michigan, or the Midwest. Who knows what the differential was? 10 times. 10 times. People went there to buy insulin, and I'll never forget it. People started crying. A woman was there with her son, started crying. She bought the same exact product for 1/10 the price in Canada as she was paying, I don't know where she lived, in the Midwest. Years before that, I had gone with people from Vermont over the Canadian border into Quebec. Same story, breast cancer drug, 1/10 the price. Turns out that right now, 1 out of 4 Americans cannot afford the medicine their doctors prescribe. Now think about how insane that is. What happens, you go to the doctor, you're feeling sick. Doctor writes a prescription, you can't afford it. What happens? You get sicker. And maybe you end up in the emergency room, maybe you end up in the hospital, maybe you die. So not only does it cause human suffering, it causes huge healthcare expenditures. All right? So what we have done is, in recent years, under Biden and Harris, we made some progress. Number one, if you are on Medicare, you're not going to pay more than $35 for insulin. That's a big deal. Number two, if you are asthmatic, we have worked really hard taken on some of the large drug companies, and we're making some progress. We're not where I want to be, but millions of people are going to see a reduction, and are seeing it right now, in the cost of asthma inhalers from hundreds of dollars down to $35. So that's... And thirdly, and most importantly, what we have done is tell the drug companies for the first time in American history that they have got to negotiate, they're going to sit down and negotiate prices with Medicare rather than just charging us any price that they want. When I was in Iowa, when I was running for president, I did a meeting, Misty Rebeck, where's Misty? There's Misty. That young lady is born and raised in Iowa and helped me run my campaign. And we did, I can't remember the town we did it, I don't know if you remember, Misty. We did a thing on medical debt. And it was a heartbreaking experience. Turns out that a whole lot of people run up huge medical debt. If you end up in the hospital and you're working class, how are you going to pay off a $100,000 debt? You know. Turns out that you go broke. 25% of the people in America who receive cancer treatment go bankrupt or deplete all of their financial resources. All right, what do we do all about that, in my view? You tell me. All right, I've laid out the problems. You tell me what the solution is. Raise your hand, give me some ideas here. I have some ideas I'd like to hear from you. Yes, ma'am.
Single-payer health care.
Okay. I agree. I mean, I think when you're dealing with healthcare, something so basic to human existence, it should not be something that corporations are making huge profits off of. It's a right. And our job, which is not easy, I mean, running a healthcare system ain't easy, but our job is to make sure that, first of all, you tell me, how many people here believe that healthcare is a human right for all? And that is what most, I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, Progressive, Conservative, people understand that. Because we all, you know, we get born, we die, we get sick in between, loved ones deal with terrible illnesses. Does it make sense to any human being in America that 25% of people dealing with cancer, think about what that is. And then you got to worry about your family going bankrupt? That's insane. That is incredibly cruel. So we have got to guarantee health care to all people. The most efficient way I think we do it is expanding Medicare. And by the way, one of the things I'm fighting for right now is, while we try to get and fight to get Medicare for all, is to expand Medicare to cover dental, hearing, and vision. Now, some of you may have noticed, I don't know how much attention it got here, but Kamala announced that she did want to expand Medicare to deal with a very important issue, and that is home health care. I don't know how it is here in Iowa, but I can tell you that in Vermont and in many parts of the country, older people do not want to be forced to go into a nursing home. They would prefer to stay home if they could get the help they need coming into their homes. All right? But they can't. By expanding Medicare to cover home health care, and she is proposing vision and hearing. A lot of seniors can't afford a hearing aid. All right? That is a big step forward, and I appreciate what she's doing on that. All right. You ask me questions, make a comment. Am I crazy? What I'm saying here, am I being too radical? All right, gentleman right here. Yeah.
My name's Austin Goodman. I'm the fifth generation Dubuque, born here in Dubuque, Iowa. I just moved back to Iowa a couple of years ago. After I graduated from school, I moved to Chicago and worked there. I got involved early on in the cannabis industry there. And what I found out that is completely criminal and corrupt and run by oligarchs. There's only about 300 people that control all the rights to control all the cannabis in Illinois. A lot of those companies, before giving the rights to any social equity candidate or giving the rights to people that live there to grow their own, sold those rights in the Canadian stock exchange. I look at cannabis as a healthcare right, just like you mentioned. There's 25 states that have legalized cannabis. I'm curious what the federal government can do to give that right to everybody.
I think the Vice President believes in the legalization of cannabis. I do too. Okay, other questions or comments? Don't be shy, guys. Yes, ma'am. Please, yeah, stand up if you can.
What can we do to stop the insurance companies from co-opting our Medicare?
Boy, they are moving, where were we? I was in Michigan, in rural Michigan, with signs all over the place, agents going out trying to, look, what you got right now is corporate America trying to privatize virtually every public institution that works for people. We're seeing it with the post office. I'm on the Veterans Committee. I don't know about here, but the VA in Vermont does a really good job taking care of our veterans. They're trying to privatize that. There's certainly efforts to privatize Social Security, and you're talking about privatization of Medicaid, and they want Medicare as well. I wish the finance, it's under the jurisdiction not of my committee, but of the Finance Committee. But you're right. Often happens is people get sucked into Medicare Advantage, and then they find out they get sick. And lo and behold, the benefits are not there for them. But at the end of the day, this is not a radical idea. In the United Kingdom, they came up with universal health care in 1948. Canadians did it in the 70s. All right? This is not a radical idea. So our fight has got to be to demand, and you know, I've introduced the legislation, leading it in the Senate. We got a lot of support in the House. But we have got to make the fight for universal health care, comprehensive health care, covering all, mental health. This is a big deal. We have, I don't know about here, but in Vermont we have a growing opioid epidemic. We're seeing people overdose. We need to figure out a way to treat that, to prevent that. We need to do more. It was very interesting. In Mexico, the new president of Mexico announced she's going to hire 20,000 doctors and nurses to go knocking on senior doors to make sure that they get the health care that they need. We need to be much more aggressive in healthcare prevention, keeping people from getting sick, keeping people from getting hooked on drugs. So that's the mission. And, you know, it embarrasses me that we're the only major country not to have that. We're the only major country not to provide paid family and medical leave. And in terms of the economy, let me tell you what we're trying to do. You tell me. What's the minimum wage here in Iowa now? Oh, you got the federal minimum wage? Okay, lucky you. All right, what we are trying, and I introduced the bill, we got it to the floor. I got 42 votes. I didn't have, you know, I know the Republicans are trying to say, oh, they're the party of the working class. Yeah, right. We didn't get one Republican vote to raise the minimum wage to only $15 an hour. We would have preferred to go higher than that, not one. And we lost 6 Democrats as well. So what we have got to do, if we're going to have an economy that works for all, raise the minimum wage to a living wage. In my view now, should be about $17 an hour. All right, other questions, comments? Yes, ma'am. Right there.
Hello, my name is Anna. I'm a sophomore at the University of Iowa, and I know you're a big advocate for college debt relief, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how college debt plays into the wealth gap.
All right. Sounds to me like you could talk about that a little bit too, huh? Again, you know, I guess the main point that I'm trying to make, you know, I have been accused by Trump and others of being far left. Everything I'm telling you is far left. I'm an extremist. The truth is that virtually everything I am telling you exists in other countries around the world. And everything I'm telling you is supported by a very strong majority of the American people. Let me talk about education, okay? All of you know we live in a very competitive global economy, right? And if we are going to succeed, we need to have the best educated workforce in the world. And by that, by the way, I don't only mean college graduates. I mean people who have had the training to become electricians and welders and plumbers. I don't know about Iowa, but if you're a plumber in Vermont, you're going to make more money than if you're a college graduate going out into the workforce, all right? Desperately, we have invested under Biden and Harris, as some of you know. We passed the largest increase in funding for infrastructure improvement in the history of the country. Money is coming into Iowa to rebuild roads and bridges and water systems and wastewater plants, put a whole lot of money into solar and other sustainable energies. You know what? We don't have enough workers in order to do the work, all right? So we need to be training millions of workers to help rebuild this country in healthcare. In education, we don't have enough teachers, all of which gets me back to your question. If we want to create the strongest economy in the world, if we want to rebuild our infrastructure, if we want to transform our energy system to protect us from the disasters we're seeing in Florida right now and climate change, if you want to do that, we have to encourage young people, say, you have got to go out, get the good education. Not, oh, by the way, if you go to college, you can come out $50,000 in debt. We desperately need more doctors in America. If a working class kid goes to medical school, you know what that young person will end up in debt? $500,000. We need more dentists, $400,000 in debt. All right, we need more nurses, $100,000 in debt. So in my view, we do two things. Number one, we should encourage young people to get education. You do that by saying we make public colleges and universities tuition free. Now, we have made, when I was running for president, we pushed to cancel all student debt. We haven't done that. But I'll tell you what we have done under Biden and Harris. We have canceled the student debt of 5 million Americans. That's not a small thing. Now, sometimes people say to me, well, Bernie, you got all these great ideas, how are you going to pay for them? And I will tell you how we're going to pay for them. And that is at a time of massive income and wealth inequality, when billionaires are paying an effective tax rate, lower than working class people, yeah, we're going to force them to start paying their fair share of taxes, period. That's it. They don't like it, but the hell with them. They're going to have to own up. They got money, they're going to have to pay their fair share of taxes. And we're going to ask the large corporations who are making a lot of money to start paying their fair share of taxes. It's another area that we have not also looked at. We spend about $1 trillion a year on the military. $1 trillion a year, even in Washington. That's a lot of money. The Pentagon is the only government agency that is not effectively submitted to an independent audit. And if anybody thinks there's not massive fraud and waste and overpaying in the Pentagon, you would be very strongly mistaken. So I think we've got to take a look at that as well. Yes, ma'am. Yep.
Hi, out of curiosity, of course my son and daughter, they're like $40,000, $50,000 in debt. And by forgiving 5 million Americans, how are they forgiving them, or how does that apply to my son and daughter? Because my son's in the Navy, my daughter is a working speech language pathologist.
Good. Have they benefited from, have they been one of the 5 million? Yes? Have they benefited, have they had their debt forgiven?
Not that I know of.
All right, you should probably call up, your senators and make sure that, learn more about it. But bottom line is, there are a number of factors. One of them is that we want people who are in public service, teachers, for example, who are in debt, to benefit from the debt forgiveness. So that's one area. If you have worked in nonprofits for a number of years, you are eligible for the debt forgiveness. There are other criteria as well. All right, but you can find out exactly what the criteria is. We wanted to do more, but Biden ran into problems with the courts and Republicans, etc. But we are making some progress. Way in the back there. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just going to comment to that. My daughter was a recipient of the student loan forgiveness. She paid $500 a month for 10 years for her loans, and after 10 years she owed more than she originally would have because of predatory
Right.
things. So she had hers forgiven because she was in a program where, certain professions, maybe she's
And has it made a difference in her life?
She worked for a public defender's office, so.
Has it made a difference in her life?
Yeah, for sure. She went and bought a Tesla. Student payments, the loan payment she was making. But yeah, she would have never got out of debt otherwise, ever. She owed more than she originally borrowed.
All right, that's the other thing.
Paying $500 a month.
Yeah, the interest rates that some of these predatory companies charge is outrageous. I mean, look, it is not, in my view, people can disagree with me. Somebody wants to go out and buy yourself a big mansion, buy yourself a big mansion. Don't ask the government to help you buy a big mansion. You want to buy a fancy car? Buy a fancy car. Government cannot help you. You want to get an education? You know what? That is our social responsibility as a people. It's good for not only the individual, it is good for our country. A well-educated workforce long-term is very good. And that, by the way, not only for graduate students or college students, it's for little kids in childcare. Psychologists tell us that the most important years of a child's life, of a person's life, 0 to 4. And yet, I don't know, again, I don't know about Iowa. I can tell you that in Vermont, many places that I go to, childcare system is broken. It is unaffordable. I talk to people paying $20,000, $25,000 a year for childcare. How do you pay $25,000 a year if you're a working person making $50,000, $60,000 a year? I don't know how. Or you can't. And the workers there are often underpaid. So it's not a radical idea to say that for the little kids, let's give them intellectually, emotionally, the best kind of environment we can. That's not a radical idea. Way in the back, sir. You got a mic coming there?
One more time around the block on the student loan forgiveness. If the tax code in our country were changed, it would be no problem for student loans. I've got 2 children who are doctors. When they got done with their residencies and their fellowships, 12 years after college they were done, one's an interventional radiologist. 12 years, $630,000. But when they left college, they had no debt. They had it all paid off. They had worked and paid all their college debt off. But this was just medical school. And
$630,000?
$630,000. But you know what the deal was? Every quarter, 7% interest was compounded. And then the next quarter, that interest was compounded again. And you know what was really bad? When they got to be doctors, they could only pay $3,000 a year of the interest that was accruing on their student loans off of their income taxes. They both have said, Dad, there wouldn't be any problem if we could just take it off our income taxes. And also, when I build a $100,000 machine shed on my farm, I can depreciate it out in 5 years. If you go to college and become a doctor, a lawyer, whatever you become, and you're using your education, you should be able to depreciate that just like we do a building, a truck, an airplane,
Good point.
whatever else it is.
Good. Thank you. So what the gentleman is saying is not only do we start off with a real problem with debt, that debt is accumulated many times over by outrageous interest rates. That is insane. And I got to say this again. This country desperately needs more doctors. We got a crisis. That ain't a way to bring more people into the medical field. Okay? Yes, ma'am, right here. Yeah, hold the mic there.
Thinking about Citizens United and the impact that has had on so many parts of our life, the judiciary is a subject that I think needs serious attention. There's a statement along the lines of justice delayed is justice denied. So my question for you is, will you support remodeling the Supreme Court of the United States on the basis of
I haven't studied that proposal, but let me say this. What we have now is an unsatisfactory disaster. And I'm talking about Roe v. Wade. I'm talking about Citizens United. I'm talking about the Chevron decision and other decisions. And how we create a more just Supreme Court is something a lot of people are talking about. It's not my area of expertise. I'm not on the Judiciary Committee. But this is what I do know to be true. The Constitution of the United States provides for lifelong tenure for federal judges. But that does not mean that a Supreme Court justice cannot be asked to serve elsewhere. So you can rotate people off of the Supreme Court into other areas of the federal court system. There are a lot of ideas that are being talked about how we deal with it. All right, yours is one, and there are others out there. But I think most people think that the current situation is just not working. All right, maybe one more question. I see a young man right in the middle there.
Thank you. While we've talked about things such as the unaffordable housing market, unfair insurance and tax rates, student debt and other topics, as someone like myself who can be graduated with 3 degrees in December, I still find it hard to believe that I'm going to achieve the American dream that generations prior to me had. What is something that you could say that could give me and some other people in my situation some hope that you'll be able to achieve that?
Okay. Well, thank you for the question. Let me just say this. It is a sad state of affairs that we now have an economic and political system that is dominated by, literally by billionaires. And we're going to have to change that, okay? So I can't give you a magical answer here to say, number one, what we need to do, you know, in America we're going to have elections, some of you may have heard, in a few weeks. 40% of the American people are not going to vote, okay? And what we need to do is to rethink how we do politics in America, to know, and we don't do it. The media does a bad job, and we do a bad job in Congress. What really are the issues, all right? Should, in the richest country in the history of the world, all of our people be entitled to a decent standard of living? So you're asking, I don't know what profession you're looking at, but you should be paid at the very least, a living wage. You should know, you know, I remember we had, a number of months ago, I had a hearing on my committee dealing with pensions. And it turns out that a whole lot of older people have nothing in the bank as they face retirement. And there was a woman there, turned out from the UAW. And she said, my grandfather, who was a UAW member, auto worker, when he retired, he got a really good pension. It was a defined benefit pension plan. He knew exactly what he was getting. And by the way, members of Congress have that plan. All right? But over the years, that used to be normal. You have a right to know when you go to a job that when you retire, you will have decent retirement funds so that you can live with dignity. You need to know that when you get sick, you can go to the doctor and if you end up in the hospital and not have to worry about the bill because we have a sane and civilized healthcare system. Okay? So it is decent wages, housing. Again, this is the richest country in the history of the world. We don't need more people on Wall Street engaged in high-speed trading. We need construction workers. We need doctors. We need teachers. We need child care workers. So all of this requires a rethinking of the economy. What do we need to live dignified lives? All right? You need decent wages. You need health care. You need education. We need to combat climate change. Well, you don't need more. Yeah. All right, so, you know, no easy answer to your question. All that I want to say is that you're living not in a poor country. We can do those things. Our last question, woman right here. Yes, ma'am.
Two things. Our governor has decided over the summer that she didn't want to give kids according to the federal program. That was one of the gazillion
Okay. Well. I am sad to hear that, because we have worked really hard in Washington to make sure that every kid in this country is fed, and I think that's Kamala Harris's point of view as well. I mean, again, it's the richest country in the world. We're talking about children going hungry, really? I mean, that's absurd. So it is disappointing. I mean, then obviously the answer is you got to deal with what you deal with politically here in the state of Iowa. But, it is my view, and I've worked very hard to make sure that every kid in this country has the food that they need in order to learn well and to grow well. All right, with that, I've got to get moving. We've got to head to Minneapolis in a while. I'm getting a tour of the Midwest. We started off in Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota. It's a good thing I love the Midwest. So come and join us in Vermont sometime. Thank you all very much. Love you too.